Good morning, everybody. Today is the 22nd day in the month of August 2022. My name is Heritage Adisa, Markets Analyst at HFM Nigeria. And as always, we'll check through the markets, figure out what's going on, what the big stories are, what the dominant sentiment is, how it's affecting asset prices, and then how we can take advantage of it. But please, like always, do remember that this is just the communication material and nothing in this communication contains or should be considered as investment advice or an investment recommendation. Users acknowledge that investment in FX and CFD products is characterized by a certain degree of uncertainty, and that any investment of this nature involves a high level of risk for which users are solely responsible and liable. Now, what we have this morning in terms of the overall market environment, still that overall negative flow, overall risk of flow in the market. And it's what we saw through most of last week, and it's continuing, so far today. Now, I had this written down earlier. Let's quickly run through it because most of the reason is in this, and then we can move on to our chart. So today, Monday, August 22nd. All right. Now, China's rate cut keeps the Antipodeans afloat despite the risk of tilt. We're into the last full trading week of August, and markets continue in the mostly negative mode that we've had through last week. As worries remain on the state of the global economy, right? We have recession fears across board. Um, there we have sky high inflation, also spurred by higher and higher energy prices, energy crisis generally, and then central bank monetary policy tightening as well. Now, you look at the equity side, equities trade mostly lower across board in the overall weak market environment. The US 500 is down near 1% so far today. And that's like the second consecutive day of downside, following Friday's downside as well. You look at commodities, commodity prices are also, broadly low as well, in line with the overall negative market environment that we are having. Even bond yields are lower, mostly lower, while measures of volatility trade higher. All of this basically points, to that risk of market environment that we've just highlighted. Now, what are the big stories? Number one, we have Russia set to also shut the Nord Stream 1 pipeline for another 3 days. This time around also citing maintenance. Now, this is the single largest, source of energy supply to the heart of Europe, that's Germany, right? And if it's closed for another 3 days, that means that there's even going to be less and less gas supply and less energy supply to, Europe, and that clearly affects the eurozone heavily because it affects production, affects basically everything in the economy. So that is still a negative, and as a result of that, the euro is one of the laggards in today's session. Even the British pound is also affected as well, also down in today's, market environment. Apart from that, despite the tilt in the negative tilt in markets, it's actually the Antipodeans, the AUD and the NZD, that lead the majors so far today. Now, why is that the case? Now, earlier we also had China cuts its short-term, interest rates, 1 year and 5 year loan prime rates as well, right? To basically try and help the heavy Chinese economy. Now, the economy has been plagued by, the highly indebted property sector, which is one of the major, strongholds in the Chinese economy. There's also that. Apart from that, we've also had this strict lockdown policy in China, where it's basically a zero COVID policy, right? One case here, two cases here. A resurgence of cases, the whole region is shut down. Now, that may be good to help curb the rising and the spread of the COVID-19 virus. But the problem is, the more you shut down regions of the major, or one of the largest economies in the world, clearly that affects economic production, affects economic activities, and it's not really a good thing for the economy generally, and even by extension, the global economy. So there's also that. And then energy crisis also affects China. China is the world's largest energy importer, basically. And then if energy supply reduces, energy prices keep going higher. It affects China basically as a major importer of this energy. So there's also that. But because China has a very strong, trade relationship with the likes of Australia and by extension New Zealand, because New Zealand has a strong relationship with Australia, that affects those currencies positively because more money, first of all, rates cuts means more money in the economy, more money supply, more economic activities. That also helps the economy in terms of, growth. It also helps its trading partners, AUD by extension, the New Zealand dollar. So there's also that on that side. And then for the US dollar and basically the other safe haven currencies, the JPY and the Swiss franc, sits somewhere in the middle of the pack. Now, for the US, later this week, I think starting on Thursday, we have the Jackson Hole Symposium. Now, it's an annual meeting where central bankers, government representatives, market participants, even the press, literally come together and then, just discuss the economy generally. Now, why it's important now is we'd like to see, or market participants are looking to pick apart, the speech by the Federal Reserve Chairman, that's Jay Powell, right, to find clues about the Fed's take on the recent job numbers, which was, static, right? Not static, static rather, solid numbers, basically doubling market expectations. And then even the inflation numbers, which more or less showed a bit of a peak, right, in the latest CPI numbers for the US. So we'd like to see if that's enough to see the Fed slow down, or the Fed will continue to fight against high inflation in the US. So that would also be an interesting one to look out for as well. So for today, the fear and greed index remains in neutral position, still around the 51 level so far today. And then clearly AUD and NZD lead the majors, while Euro pounds, even the CAD, are mostly at the bottom of the majors. But looking ahead, the economic calendar is basically empty. Literally, there's nothing on the calendar today, right? And then with Jackson Hole Symposium being the highlight of the week, markets may lay in wait for that key event. But don't forget, so far, sentiment is dour, negative. Antipodeans could, fall back in line with the negative environment before the day runs out. So that's that about that. Let's just quickly run through the charts before we go. Now, looking at the equities, for example, this is Friday, we had a downside in equities. And then so far today, we've also continued to the downside. Haven't hit a peak. There's one key level that was calling our attention to, I think it was last week, a couple of market participants, as well as myself, we're looking at this key level, this key area, right? The overall market environment has been negative for equities, right? When you talk about recession fears, talk about central bank tightening, talk about high inflation, all of this have not really been the best, right? Yes, we could talk about central banks slowing down a bit, but in the real sense, inflation is near 10% in the likes of the US, Europe, UK, right? Being that the case, should central bankers not continue to, cut hike rates to try and get inflation back under control? Are we really at the end of tightening? And then central bankers have been shouting it that, the fight for inflation is still very, very much in play. So I really think that there's still so much, downside for equities. But clearly, what you want to pay attention to is this key area that I pointed out from last week, for 3.00. Since then, we've really been pushing lower from that level. So that's one to pay attention to as well in today's session. But let's see how the rest of that plays out. So far today we're down over 1% on the US 500. The Nasdaq is the same case, down as well in today's session. The Dow Jones also down as well in today's session. The VIX, right, is higher. Measures of volatility are pushing higher as well. The dollar index is also higher. With energy, with Euro also, being weaker as well. We're seeing a little bit of tilt to the upside in the dollar index, but that's also watch out for as well. Now, yields being lower, particularly the US 10-year being low, has also seen Japanese yen crosses also push lower as well in recent couple of minutes, right? You look at, most JPY crosses also starting to head lower, but I'm not looking to still jump on this just yet. With JPY still trading mostly mixed, and then that's still a little bit to, be cautious about. But you look across board, basically seeing that, spike to the downside, right, on JPY crosses, signaling strength in Japanese yen on the back of falling bond yields, particularly the US 10-year. So yes, that's also look out for. But looking onto strengths and weaknesses, Euro NZD down as well in today's session, down by 0.75% so far today, basically very close to the ATR already. We've broken through this key area 1.615 key round number there as well. And then the next key area of support once we're looking out for would be this next 1.606100. So that will be the next key area of support that we're looking out for. If you wanted to look at this could be an interesting one if we can clear out the lows going back to the 28th of July. Also similar on the 1st of August, as well as even the 4th of August. That could also be interesting in terms of further downside as well in today's session. But it's still a Monday, it's a light calendar. I don't trust NZs to keep the strength, being the fact that equities are lower, risk of flows remain. So I'm being more patient and waiting out for something a little bit more highly convincing or more concrete for looking to jump into this. Now, you want to look at Euro AUD US dollar as well, in line with strength and weakness so far, right? Also down in today's session, also struggling around this key 1.4500 level, key area of resistance and support as well, on this particular pair. What I would really prefer would be, more upside in the dollar, With yields being lower though, it's more or less, weakens that bias. But I think JPY's strength should be good because you talk about risk off, clear. Talk about falling bond yields, clear, right? Equities down, clear for the JPY, even though on their own side, the central bank has not really been helping. But short term, if you look at that, NZD JPY, I think could be an interesting one to look out for. Although the fact that we've even been ranging for the last couple of sessions just makes it a bit tricky. So that's one to just be watchful about. But look at pounds JPY, for example. Now this is a bit more interesting for me. Right now we've seen strong downside as well pushed into today's session. If we can get a rotation back towards Friday's lows, just above the 161.5 level, that could be interesting in terms of further downside. That's just looking at that key level there. Also Thursday's low, basically. Let me just mark it out so we can see. That could be interesting. If you look at Euro JPY, finally, before we go, Euro JPY, all right, also could be an interesting one as well. We've also pushed lower. All right, we've also pushed lower as well in today's session, right? Strongly lower, broken through this key area, even though, in terms of levels, it's a bit tricky there to look out for. But, placing our MAs on the charts and see if we get anything, to latch onto as well in this particular case. So, I mean, it's a bit tricky. I mean, the only way we can get is maybe a rotation back towards late American low on Friday, right? Let's just see. Maybe this very close to this 50 cent moving average on the 5 minutes time frame. Maybe that could be helpful in terms of looking for further downside on this particular pair. Like I said, the calendar is basically empty. We have nothing on the calendar. So overall sentiment remains a key driver. It's risk off for now, remains a key driver. Pay attention to the key themes in markets, and then do have an amazing trading day. So that's it for now. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. And like always, we'll do our best to help out. Thank you. Do enjoy the rest of your trading session. Bye for now.